Mark Carney is the crisis. Welcome back to another episode of Stand on Guard. A very happy and blessed Sunday to you. It's a beautiful day in our nation's capital. I'm coming at you live here from Ottawa. Mark Carney had his first news conference yesterday as Prime Minister. I'm going to go through most of it, pick out the parts that I think are most important, and explain why I think what it means. Now, if that doesn't make any sense, I'm sorry. We'll be right back.
The Prime Minister lied and his minions continue to lie.
We need a political change. But we also need to resolve to resist. Yes, thank you for subscribing. Thank you for liking the station and all of your support. We're on our way to 100,000, a little ways away, but we're going to do it with your help and support. Thank you so much for joining us today. So Mark Carney, remember him? Yeah. He had his first news conference as Prime Minister yesterday, and I drew some conclusions from that. I've heard some crazy things on YouTube about Mark Carney going full conservative, or Mark Carney stealing all of Poilievre's ideas. That's nonsense. Mark Carney is no conservative. Mark Carney is about power. So if you think Mark Carney is going to deliver what Pierre Poilievre promised to deliver, I'm afraid you're going to be sadly mistaken. He's using some of the buzzwords that the conservative platform included, especially affordability and safety. And you'll hear those words as we go through the news conference, which is about 34 minutes long. I've distilled it down to about 5 or 6 minutes, and just what I think are the most salient points in terms of whether or not Mark Carney is really gone conservative, has really gone conservative. Affordability can mean different things to different people. Safety can mean different things to different people. Carney once said his two favorite political leaders were Karl Marx and Vladimir Lenin, which is, in my estimation, would make him a Marxist-Leninist. However, there are people who now think he's a conservative. Mark Carney has been playing a role ever since he burst on the scene in January, February of this year. You recall I originally assessed him as being like the character Chauncey Gardner out of Being There, the Peter Sellers character, because he seemed to be constantly searching for words, constantly searching for an identity. That's the role he was playing at the time. When you see him at this news conference from yesterday, he looks like the dictator of the world. He is so confident, so self-assured. He has the media eating out of his hand. That's the role he's playing today. Throughout the campaign, he played the role of, I hate Donald Trump. Donald Trump is my nemesis. Donald Trump is the eternal enemy of Canada. That, too, was a role. He was playing a game because as soon as the election was over, he's on the phone with Donald Trump. And they're getting together, Tuesday in Washington? Just like old friends. And guess what? They are. So that's what this has all been about, role playing from day one. Now, affordability, well, it means something to Pierre Poilievre. It means you can afford to live in a free enterprise economy. What does it mean to Mark Carney? Does it mean the government's going to dole out enough money to make your life just affordable? Joseph Stalin, the dictator of the Soviet Union, he believed in affordability. Sure, as long as you followed communist ideology, the whole collectivization of the farm system in the Soviet Union was about affordability for the people in the cities, so they could afford food, even if it meant millions of people had to die in the process. Better be careful. How about safety? Well, lots of dictators have believed in safety, safety for the people they want to keep safe. If you don't accept the regime, well, you're unsafe. But you have a choice to be safe. Just accept the dictates and the policies of the regime and Big Brother, and you'll be safe to some degree until they come to get you. Then you won't be safe anymore. So don't tell me Mark Carney's gone conservative. He is again exhibiting the qualities he's always exhibited and the ideology he's always possessed, which is power and wealth. That's what Mark Carney's about. Now let's go through. Before I do that, though, I want to show this clip because, frankly, I was absolutely amazed at this.
Have told me that they found it really difficult going door to door because a lot of people were saying, we like some of the policies you're doing, but we think your leader's a dick. And we really, and we did, and we think, yes, you know, I'm sorry, but that's what they're telling me.
All right, I'm gonna have some ombudsman's paperwork to fill out before I go home tonight, I think. But yes, not in such language, but I have heard similar sentiments expressed from conservative candidates.
This is Bob Fife, the Globe and Mail, who was involved in doing some serious reporting just about a year ago on China and Chinese interference. Now he's using words like that to describe Pierre Poilievre. And of course, Q-Ball Cochran from CBC just thinks it's a riot. This kind of language has no place in the newsroom, whether you're referring to the liberal leader or the conservative leader. I can't believe how the level of dialogue, the level of discourse has sunk so low. And I can't believe my old friend Bob Fife, and I haven't seen Bob in years, but I used to have coffee with Bob Fife when I worked for a member of parliament on the Hill. And Bob, you have to remember, started out at the Ottawa Sun, or was it Toronto Sun? It was with the Sun chain. And he was basically a small C conservative in those days, as far as I could tell, my interpretation. But for Bob to use language, I'm just amazed. I'm disappointed in you, Bob. Very, very disappointed. But perhaps I shouldn't be surprised because the mainstream media is very much eating out of Mark Carney's hand right now. It's almost embarrassing to see the level of slavishness coming from the mainstream media. And I'm just amazed. And before I get to that news conference, I wanted to show you this. Fascinating. Majority of Canadians say misinformation affected the federal election. Poll. Yes, well, I had a look at that poll. And it was an online poll and some fascinating things. It was a Leger poll conducted right after the election. 79% of people in Quebec, 76% of people in Ontario, and 73% of people in BC said misinformation had an impact on the election. 86% overall. But here's the interesting thing. You know how liberals are always telling you misinformation, disinformation, it's coming from people like me. It's coming from those new media. It's coming from the independent media. It's coming from small C conservatives, libertarians, people who don't accept the hegemonic liberal discourse. Those are the people creating the misinformation and disinformation, according to the liberal government. However, folks, liberal supporters, according to this poll, were the least likely to think misinformation had a role in the election at 74%, compared to 83% of conservative voters. Now, what does that tell you? Perhaps it tells you that misinformation is coming from the CBC, from the CTV, from global news, from the mainstream media, not from new media, not from independent media. Now, I'm going to show this news conference now, parts of it. I'll point out elements that I think are absolutely frightening, because apparently a lot of my colleagues missed this and thinking, good old Mark, he's talking like Pierre Poilievre. but he's not. He's using some of the same language. Some of his statements are ominous. And I probably don't need to point them out to you because I've got a very intelligent audience. But I'll do so nonetheless.
Clear, since day one of my leadership campaign in January, I'm in politics to do big things, not to be something.
I'm in politics to do big things. Mark Carney's always seen himself as one of the big people doing the big things. And this is entirely in keeping with what he said during the campaign about he understands the real world. And he's here to do big things.
Coming weeks, I will unveil more of our plans to engage with Canadians as we embark on the biggest transformation of our economy since the end of the Second World War.
The biggest transformation of our economy since the end of the Second World War. Hold it! Isn't this the guy who was just the economic advisor to Justin Trudeau? Does this make any sense to you? Why, if he was the economic advisor to Justin Trudeau, did he not make that transformation at that time? What does he have in mind for Canada? That's my question. What is he up to? What is he actually thinking here? Because I find this ominous. I know I've used that word far too many times this morning, but this is, okay, frightening. He wants the biggest transformation. What does that mean? We're going to a communist government? We're going to a communist, totally socialist economy? We're not going to have free enterprise anymore? Or we're going to a fascist economy? We're going to a globalist economy? Okay, that's where he's going. It's the transformation is from sovereignty to lack of sovereignty, from national economy to international globalist economy. That's the transformation he's talking about.
This will be an incredibly exciting time as we take control of our economic destiny to create a new Canadian economy that works for everyone.
I'm sorry, I can't help but thinking about Marx and Lenin there. Works for everyone. That means from each according to his ability, to each according to his needs. That's called like an economy that works for everyone. Well, that's when the state is in control. That's when Mark Carney is in control. Now, some of you out there might be saying, Krayden, you're way off base. You're reading things into this. I don't think so, because Mark Carney has already expressed his real beliefs in his writing, like the book Values, where he talks about his admiration for Karl Marx and Vladimir Lenin. So why do we think he's overnight become a conservative? Or in the last 5 weeks, he's become a conservative? No. He is still somebody dedicated to a state-run program. But the state in this case is international. It's going to be run out of the WEF. That's not a conspiracy theory. The WEF has designs on our economy. Klaus Schwab has said they've inserted their people into the cabinets of the world. And this is another insertion. And what does the WEF want? Look at their website. I'm not making this up. Look at their website. They want you to eat insects. They want you to have nothing and like it.
We will begin to set out that new path for Canada with a new cabinet to be sworn in on the week of the 12th of May. As I've stressed repeatedly, our old relationship, based on steadily increasing integration, is over. The questions now are how our nations will cooperate in the future and where we in Canada will move on. So we will put more money in Canadians' pockets with a middle-class tax cut that will take effect by Canada Day, saving two-income families up to $825 a year.
Hold everything. First of all, he's talking about Donald Trump and our relationship with the United States. It's not going to be the same. Yes, we know that because you plan to devalue the Canadian and the US dollars. We've reported on that earlier during the campaign. But he's putting how much money back in our pockets? $825? That's not enough to pay the rent for people living in any Canadian city. In fact, it's not half enough to pay the rent. So that's a middle class tax cut, $825 a year. After we have been compounded with taxes over the last decade, Canada is one of the most heavily taxed nations on earth. And he thinks $825 is going to rectify things? Sorry, not at all.
We will protect the programs that save families thousands of dollars a year, including pharmacare and $10 a day daycare. We will expand the Canadian dental care plan to 8 million Canadians, saving the average family over $800 per visit.
There's that $800 again. All right, so he's going to expand pharmacare, dental care, all of these social programs. And that's just the beginning. So if you listen to this speech, this news conference, he's not advocating any conservative policies in this speech. He's using conservative buzzwords. He's using conservative ideas without explaining how he's going to interpret them. This is what Mark Carney is all about.
To lower costs for first-time homebuyers, we will cut GST on new homes at or under $1 million, allowing them to save up to $50,000, and we will lower the GST on homes between $1 million and $1.5 million.
Okay, that's something he said during the campaign. Good idea. But of course, there should be no GST to begin with.
Canadians in the NHL.
All right. Listen carefully to this, because this is really the core of his speech. And this is what I think is the most ominous. I'll say it again. This is where he indicates we need a one-party state in Canada, or at least this is what it sounds like. Let's not have any differences. Let's not have any arguments. Let's all be under one banner.
Play for a variety of teams passionately against each other. But when they're in a once-in-a-lifetime series such as the Four Nations or the Olympics, those same Canadians come together to win it all. During elections, Canadians play and cheer for different teams. Now that election is over, and we are in a once-in-a-lifetime crisis. It's time together, it's time to come together, to put on our Team Canada sweaters and win big. Il est temps.
That's the key to understanding Mark Carney's news conference. We all put on the Team Canada sweater. Is that a one-party state? Or am I reading too much into this? I don't know how he's going to do it. He's already talked about using emergency powers to enforce his policies. Will he use emergency powers to make the Liberal government, the only party? Because it's happened before. He's warned us. And there were enough stupid Canadians out there who ignored the warning. Any time a prime minister in waiting or a prime minister says, I'm going to use emergency powers, watch out. Because that's what Mark Carney said during the campaign. He didn't say it often, but he issued the warning. He indicated that's what he's up to. And we're all on the same team. There's no opposition. Read his lips. That's what he's saying here. And this is why he's saying, I don't need the NDP. I don't need any more seats to make a majority. I'm the government. It's quite clear, if you listen to this man, where he's going.
How do you avoid an Oval Office ambush like we saw happen to President Zelensky?
Look, I go there with the expectation of constructive, difficult, but constructive discussions. That's the spirit of the conversations that the President and I had. You go to these meetings well prepared, understanding the objectives of your counterpart, and always acting in the best interest of Canada, and we'll go from there. Thank you.
The question is interesting. She's alluding, of course, to the time shyster and grifter Ukrainian president, the corrupt dictator, Volodymyr Zelensky, went to the news conference at the White House. And the news conference was interrupted by J.D. Vance, amongst others, who demanded Zelensky tell the truth. So this reporter is saying, how do you avoid that, something like that happening? Because we don't want other people involved in this news conference demanding you tell the truth. The fact that you railed against Donald Trump for 5 weeks and suddenly embraced him after the election, and that Donald Trump helped you get elected. Donald Trump interfered in our election campaign to get you elected. I'm still trying to figure that one out, folks. Although I think I have a few ideas.
Semp. I've already indicated to Mr. Poilievre that if it's the decision of him and the Conservative Party to trigger, if I can put it that way, a by-election, I will ensure that it happens as soon as possible.
Okay.
No games, nothing, straight.
Lindsey Gray.
Isn't that nice? There's going to be any games over Pierre Poilievre's by-election. And of course, he's running in a very safe seat. It's Bow River, no, Crowfoot, Bow River Crowfoot, I believe. I should have written this down, but he's acting like he's doing him a favor. And of course, he wants Poilievre sanctioned. He wants him in the government, so to speak. So no, he won't try to block Pierre Poilievre's by-election. He wants that by-election to occur because he wants Poilievre in the House of Commons, justifying his reign.
Global.
Hi, Mr. Carney. In your second call with the president, did Mr. Trump outright say or insinuate at any point that Canada should become the 51st state?
He did not.
All right. We've heard Mr. Trump on April 23rd and his surrogates throughout the final days of the campaign reiterate the idea that they believe Canada should become the 51st state. On the campaign trail, you said on multiple occasions that respect for Canada would be one of the key things in terms of having a meeting with him. Do you think over the past few days we have seen respect for Canada from the Trump administration?
Look, it's always important to distinguish want from reality. La volonté et la réalité, right? What someone wants and what is reality, and what the Canadian people clearly have stated, virtually without exception, is this will never, ever happen. And if any of the leaders of the party and their representatives would attest to that, I think the votes attest to it, I think the public dialogue attests to it as well. We are, we're meeting as heads of our government.
But he's trying desperately not to explain why Donald Trump was the enemy for 5 weeks, well, and longer, before the election, maybe say 2 or 3 months. And now, of course, they're old friends. And he's hoping for the best. And believe me, he can hope for the best, because these two go back a long way. Now, why did Donald Trump want Mark Carney to win this election? Why does Donald Trump want to lead Mark Carney on? Why is he inviting him down to Washington within days of his election? Clearly, Donald Trump wants to hollow out Canada, to ensure it deteriorates, because he's sick of woke Canada. He's sick of the policies coming from Canada. He's sick of leaders like Justin Trudeau. And he's going to tell Mark Carney, it's over. It's not going to happen anymore. We are asserting ourselves. And Mark Carney, of course, is playing along because he's double dealing too. He's got plans to devalue the US dollar and the Canadian dollar and to undermine Donald Trump. So this is a battle between two politicians who are pretending to be the best of friends and allies who can negotiate, but are secretly undermining each other.
To my colleague's point, the White House's public position has continued to be that Canada should be the 51st state. You yourself have said that Donald Trump is trying to break Canada. Considering all that, how can you expect good faith negotiations when you travel to Washington next week?
Look, I think first I've had the direct conversation with him on whatever day it was, Tuesday, I guess it was, a couple of days ago. And we agreed to have those negotiations. Very clear discussion between us, as I said, very constructive. I would say the time allocated to our meeting and the seniority of he's the president, so that's as senior as you get, but the other members of his administration who will be assisting at those meetings suggests the seriousness of the discussions. Again, do not expect white smoke out of that meeting. There'll be white smoke probably later somewhere else in the world this month, but do not expect that. But so that's the first thing, is just the level of the direct dialogue, the discussion, the level of people there.
Do you think there's any correlation between his reference to white smoke, which of course occurs after a new pope is elected, or basically appointed by a bunch of cardinals? The white smoke goes up the chimney, indicating they have a new pope. And the fact that Donald Trump released an image of himself as the pope. What is going on here behind the scenes? What is the international link here? Because what worries me is that we have been moved to the next level, and that Mark Carney is going to start telling us where we're going in no uncertain terms. So listen to a bit more before I say more.
Get in. Is that he respects, as others who are good negotiators, and he's one of the best negotiators, they respect strength. That's why we're building Canada strong. There's lots of reasons to build Canada strong, but the point is, and I will make this point repeatedly, we have more than enough to do here at home.
Okay, how is he building Canada strong? All he's really talked about, he's talked about putting more money into national defense, which of course is not going to happen. And even if they put another 1% of our GDP into national defense, it's going to go nowhere between creating a viable defense force. And of course, he's talking about affordable housing. And these will probably be housing blocks that his company has some influence in, if they're not the outright contractor. So we're going to have a lot of Soviet-style housing in this country. People basically living in block apartment houses. That's Mark Carney's solution. We're almost at the end of the news conference.
Canadians voted for many reasons in different circumstances. First and foremost, what we've been talking about most of this time, standing up to the Americans, getting the best deal for Canada. That's there. Relatedly, a strong economy that works for everyone. But also, clearly, affordability issues. We had a big focus on affordability, security, and safety. That's what we take. That's what we take as. Maybe I should say personally, I take as the mandate that the focus of this government should be on those issues. As you know, to govern is to choose. You have to decide where you're going to focus. And I'm signaling, and of course there will be a speech from the throne and subsequent communications, but I'm signaling clearly where that focus is.
Okay, did you get that? The three key elements of the Carney government are going to be affordability, security, and safety. These are all words that the Conservative Party used during the election campaign. Very true. They're all words that mean different things to different people and different things to different parties. And by the way, it's Battle River Crowfoot, where Pierre Poilievre is going to be running. I just wanted to clarify that. Affordability, once again, socialism promises affordability. Security, communism and other governments to the far right promised security, promised huge militaries, promised to put people in jail. That's security. Safety. Well, there's no safer place than a prison cell. And believe me, Mark Carney could be talking about that. Because that's how nebulous this whole program is. That's how nebulous his phraseology is. It can mean anything from the far right to the far left. Mark Carney is a pretty clever and cunning individual. He knows how to employ language to make you think what he wants you to think. And Mark Carney wants you to think right now he's a middle of the road, small c conservative who's not going to do anything radical, even though he started the news conference by saying it's the most incredible transformation of the Canadian economy since the Second World War. What does that mean? He's not saying. All he's telling you in this news conference is that he's for affordability, security, safety. Who isn't? Yes, the Conservatives campaigned on those three things, but they can be transformed into very, very different ideas. I want to show you how incredibly in the pocket the national media is. Of course, one of the worst things about Mark Carney winning election and Pierre Poilievre losing this election is that the CBC will no longer be defunded. My God, I waited for that to happen for years. I remember going to Conservative MPs when the Harper government was in power with a policy paper. I was working for a conservative think tank at the time, and I had written the policy paper explaining why the CBC should be privatized and why it could be privatized because there was no good reason not to. And it could probably survive financially, even without its $1.3 billion in subsidies, if it just tried and stopped paying its high-rolling bureaucrats, its high-rolling executives such huge salaries. If it tightened its belt, focused on news, and stopped wasting money, and actually use the private sector in terms of advertising revenue in a responsible way, it could probably have survived. And they always said, no, we're not interested. So here we finally have a conservative leader who wants to defund the CBC, and he didn't get elected. So now the CBC thinks it's over. We're going to keep getting money in perpetuity because Mark Carney has said not only will the CBC get its $1.3 billion a year, it's going to be increased, and it's going to be absolutely guaranteed. So here's how the CBC's talking now.
I don't.
Oh, sorry.
Told me that they found it really difficult going.
I'm still trying to
Not
find
be
it.
able
Here we
to
go.
rely on post-COVID inflation crisis that was fueled by, war in the breadbasket of Europe and supply.
David, you know this. You know that inflation is caused when governments print money.
Well,
That's what the Liberals did. The Liberals flooded the economy with brand new cash. It has nothing to do.
They spent money. They didn't print money. The Bank of Canada did not increase the number of banknotes in circulation in the economy. They used settlement balances. They used settlement balances to buy government bonds to put liquidity. I'm not being dishonest.
They created money out of thin air. They massively expanded the money supply. You know this.
They did not permanently increase the money supply, Mr. Scheer. But anyway, I don't want to have an argument on monetary policy. They used settlement balances to buy bonds, to lower interest rates, to put liquidity into the banking system, and then they remove those settlement balances over time. So,
are you denying that there is more currency, whether it's digital or real, in the Canadian economy today? Are you denying?
I'm saying they use settlement balances, and you're calling it money. There may be a small marginal increase, but it is not the anyway. Everybody had anyway. All right. Yeah. Here we go. But I want to ask about, we just disagreed on something here.
Here's why is Cuball Cochran mouthing government talking points? Is he the press secretary for Mark Carney? Is he the communications director for the Liberal Party? But clearly he is in the bag, as far as I'm concerned, for the Liberals in this statement. He is saying Liberals didn't print money. Liberals aren't responsible for inflation. Well, of course they did. Of course they are. And Andrew Scheer has to point this out. But it's very disappointing to see journalists behave in this way and insist the government is not at fault. How dare you insist the government's at fault? The government can't be at fault. But I find this just because, of course, Cochrane was the same guy who wanted to kick out Ezra Levant at the leaders' debate, at the French leaders' debate. He didn't want them there because CBC believes it's entitled to be the preeminent media organization in Canada. And yes, the others, those other subsidized mainstream media, they're allowed to join the parade too, but CBC is the most important. So that's where we are after this news conference. I'll be back in a few minutes with my concluding remarks. Thanks for joining me today on Stand on Guard. It's always a pleasure. I'll be back again tomorrow at 10 o'clock. It's Sunday. It's a beautiful day here. I hope it's a beautiful day where you are. Go to church this morning. I'm going there very shortly. Thanks for watching. God bless this country. Godspeed to all of you. And let's continue to resolve, to resist. I think this country is still worth it to some degree. We have to keep fighting. And if we lose that fight, then we have to look at other options. Bye for now.